Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Wednesday, April the 19th, 2023. Continuing to look at our gospel reading from this past Sunday, Matthew 28, 16 through 20, particularly the last two verses where Jesus tells the disciples, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you." Baptize and teach, make disciples. The following is a story of a missed opportunity to do just that. A 13-year-old Mongolian inherited some land from his father, and through great strategy and awesome fighting ability, he formed fighting bands that conquered village after village after village. Eventually, he became known as Genghis Khan, and he ruled ultimately over 2 million people. His empire stretched from China to India and from Siberia to the edges of Western Europe. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, at this very same time, a great revival was occurring under the preaching of men like St. Francis of Assisi. Well, at his death, the bulk of the Khan's empire went to his grandson, Kublai Khan. He had two Italians in his court at that time, named Polo, the father and uncle of Marco Polo, who told him about Christ. And Kublai was very interested, so he sent them back to Europe with a request to bring 100 missionaries, saying, "When we learn about Christianity, there'll be more Christians in my empire than in all of Europe." Well, the Polos returned to Europe to enlist men who would be willing to share the gospel. They begged and pleaded, but only two friars and Marco himself would follow them back to the Orient. So these 5 men began their long journey, but the 2 friars at one point turned back. And so when the remaining 3 men arrived in Kublai's realm, Kublai asked, "Where are the missionaries?" But no one came. No one apparently cared enough. Despite all that was going on in Europe in terms of religious revival, no one was willing to take it throughout the world. Eventually, church did send a small handful of missionaries, but by then it was too late. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. A missed opportunity. But then there's a story about somebody we're all familiar with. We celebrated St. Patrick's Day just last month. For us, of course, it really is about wearing green and drinking a whole lot. But it really is a story of someone who was a significant missionary. Patrick was born on the western side of Britain that was susceptible at that time to Irish raids. His father was a deacon, grandfather a priest. Patrick had a very religious upbringing. But when he was about 16 years old, he was out working in his father's field when Irish militia raided the land. Patrick was kidnapped and carried off as a slave to Ireland. There he worked as a herdsman, remaining a captive for 6 long years. And during that time, he writes that his faith grew and that he prayed daily. Well, after 6 years, he finally escaped by stowing away on a ship. He traveled more than 200 miles, finally returning home. When he was of age, he followed in his father and grandfather's footsteps, eventually became a bishop in the church. But in the latter half of his life, Patrick felt called to become a missionary, to go back to the land in which he'd been a slave and share the message of the gospel. And so in the latter part of the 5th century, just 400 years or so after the death of Christ, Patrick became instrumental in bringing Christianity to Ireland. Part of his success came through the simplicity of his message, where others had struggled to explain things like the concept of the Trinity, for instance. Patrick relied on a simple illustration. Legend has it that he used the shamrock or 3-leaf clover, which was a symbol of national pride at Ireland at the time and even today, to explain the nature of the triune God of the Bible. Each leaf is separate and distinct, yet part of the whole. It's just one clover, yet with 3 individual leaves. And while this analogy certainly isn't perfect by any means, this representation of the Trinity, by making this simple comparison, was able to enable countless Irish men and women to accept the basic concept of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so St. Patrick's Day is supposed to be a celebration of the life of St. Patrick himself, who died on March 17th, as well as a celebration of the birth of Christianity in Ireland. One missed opportunity, one opportunity that was taken advantage of. What are the opportunities in our day, in our lives? What are the ways in which we can move that mission along of making disciples of all nations? Well, we'll continue to talk about that tomorrow as we continue to explore Matthew 28, 16 through 20. Until then, take care. Bye.